Don't talk. Simple human janitor saved alien king after she witnessed something shocking. The mop hit the marble floor with a wet slap that echoed through the empty corridors of the Zarathi royal palace. Maya Carter pushed a strand of blonde hair from her sweaty forehead, her blue eyes scanning the ornate alien architecture that had become her prison. Golden veins pulsed through the crystalline walls like living arteries, casting an eerie glow that never let her forget she was in their world now. 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days she counted silently, the same ritual that kept her sane since the Zarathi had conquered Earth. 3 years since she'd last tucked her 6-year-old daughter Emma into bed in their small apartment in Denver. 3 years since the silver ships had blotted out the sun and turned humanity into nothing more than cleaning supplies with heartbeats. Maya's worn sneakers squeaked against the polished floor as she moved deeper into the command wing. This was dangerous territory. Humans weren't supposed to clean here after midnight, but she'd volunteered for the graveyard shift. The extra food rations meant her younger sister Lila wouldn't go to bed hungry, and maybe, just maybe, she could gather information about her brother Elias. Her brother. The thought twisted in her stomach like a rusty knife. Elias Carter, former electrical engineer, now rotting in Labor Camp 7 for allegedly sabotaging a power grid. The Zarathi called it terrorism. Maya knew better. Her brother couldn't hurt a fly, let alone orchestrate an attack that killed 12 aliens. But truth didn't matter when you were human. The command hall stretched before her like a cathedral of oppression. Holographic star maps floated above conference tables, showing the vast Zarathi empire that now included a small blue dot labeled Earth Sector 7. Maya's jaw clenched. Her home planet was just another number in their collection. She was wringing out her mop when she heard voices echoing from the war room ahead. Maya froze. Nobody should be here this late. The night shift guards were supposed to be in the lower levels, and King Kale, the young ruler who'd inherited this mess from his warmongering father, was rumored to sleep exactly 4 hours between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. Her survival instincts screamed at her to leave, but something made her creep closer. Maybe it was the desperate hope that she might overhear something about prisoner releases. Maybe it was the fury that had been building in her chest for 3 years. Or maybe it was just the reckless stupidity that Elias always said would get her killed. The voices grew clearer as she approached the massive doorway. Maya pressed herself against the cold crystal wall, her heart hammering against her ribs. The human pest problem once and for all. A deep, gravelly voice was saying. Maya recognized it immediately. High Advisor Delos, King Kale's mentor and the architect of Earth's integration into the Empire. The timing must be perfect. Another voice replied, this one belonging to General Vex, the military commander whose face was plastered on wanted posters across every human settlement. If we move too early, some loyalists might escape. Maya's blood turned to ice water. She inched closer to the doorway, barely breathing. Kale is weak, Delos continued, his voice dripping with disgust. His father conquered 12 systems, but this boy talks of sustainable governance and interspecies cooperation pathetic. The humans have made him soft. General Vex spat. He actually suggested giving them better food rations last week. Food rations! For livestock. Through the crack in the doorway, Maya could see 3 figures huddled around a holographic display. Delos, tall, insected, with 4 arms and eyes like black diamonds. General Vex, broader, more reptilian, with scales that shifted color when he moved. And a third figure she didn't recognize, shorter but emanating an aura of menace. Once Kale is eliminated, the unknown figure hissed, we'll have 48 hours before the outer colonies learn of the leadership change. That's our window. And the humans? Delos asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Complete extermination. Every adult, every child. We'll blame it on a human uprising, say they killed Kale in a terrorist attack, and we had no choice but to respond with overwhelming force. Maya's legs nearly gave out. Her vision blurred, and she had to bite her knuckle to keep from screaming. Emma. Sweet Emma with her gap-toothed smile and her collection of butterfly drawings. Lila, barely 19, who still cried at night when she thought Maya wasn't listening. Elias, who might already be dead in that horrible camp. All of them. Gone. The beauty of it, General Vex was saying, is that the other conquered species will see what happens to rebels. It will ensure compliance for generations. When? The third figure asked. Tomorrow night, Delos replied. Kale has scheduled a private audience with the colonial ambassadors. He'll be alone in his chambers at midnight, reviewing territorial agreements. One quick strike, and the Empire will finally be rid of its weakness. Maya's entire world tilted. Tomorrow night. Less than 24 hours to stop a genocide. She was so focused on the conversation that she almost missed the sound of footsteps echoing from the main corridor behind her. Heavy boots on marble, moving with casual confidence. Maya's eyes widened in terror as she realized someone was approaching the war room, someone who had no idea they were walking into a death trap. The footsteps grew louder, accompanied by a young voice humming an alien melody. Maya risked a glance around the corner and saw a figure she recognized from mandatory viewing ceremonies, King Kale himself. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe in his late 20s, with the characteristic blue-gray skin of the Zarathi royal bloodline and silver markings that indicated his noble status. He wore simple sleeping robes instead of his ceremonial armor, looking more like a tired young man than the ruler of a galactic empire. He was walking straight toward the war room where his closest advisors were plotting his murder. Maya's mind raced. If Kale entered that room, he'd be dead within seconds. And with him would die any hope of stopping the human genocide. But if she warned him, she'd reveal that a human had been eavesdropping on classified conversations, an offense punishable by immediate execution. The footsteps were getting closer. Inside the war room, the conspirators had gone quiet, probably hearing the approaching sounds. Kale rounded the corner, still humming softly to himself. He was less than 10 feet from the doorway when Maya made the choice that would change everything. She dropped her mop with a loud clatter and lunged forward, clamping her hand over Kale's mouth from behind. His eyes went wide with shock and fury, his hands moving instinctively to the weapon at his side. "Don't talk," Maya whispered urgently in his ear, her voice barely audible even to herself. "Please! They'll kill us both." For a moment that lasted an eternity, Kale struggled against her grip. He was stronger than he looked, but Maya held on with the desperate strength of a mother fighting for her child's life. Slowly, as the voices from the war room became audible again, Kale stopped struggling. His eyes, Maya realized, were a startling shade of violet, nothing like the cold, reptilian stares she'd grown used to from other Zarathi. There was intelligence there, and something that might have been understanding. The conspirators were talking again, their voices carrying clearly through the open doorway. "Blast charges in the main support pillars. The whole throne room will collapse. Make it look like structural failure?" "Exactly. An unfortunate accident during renovations." Maya felt Kale's body go rigid as he heard his own death being planned. She kept her hand pressed firmly over his mouth, her other arm wrapped around his chest to keep him steady. They stood there, frozen in the shadows, as three of the most powerful beings in the galaxy discussed murder and genocide with the casual indifference of planning a dinner menu. Time moved like thick honey. Maya's arm began to cramp, her heart hammered so loud she was sure the aliens would hear it, and Kale's breathing grew sharp and controlled against her palm. Finally, after what felt like hours, the meeting broke up. The conspirators filed out through a side exit, their voices fading as they disappeared into the palace's depths. Maya held her position for another full minute, making sure they were truly gone, before slowly releasing her grip on the most powerful man in the known universe. Kale spun around to face her, his violet eyes blazing with questions, anger, and something that might have been gratitude. For the first time in 3 years, Maya Carter, invisible human janitor, desperate sister, grieving mother, found herself looking an alien in the eye as an equal. Either of them spoke. They didn't dare. But in that moment of shared silence, with the weight of genocide and revolution hanging between them, an alliance was born that would either save two civilizations or destroy them both. Kale's violet eyes burned with questions, but Maya pressed a finger to her lips and jerked her head toward a maintenance panel she noticed during her countless cleaning rounds. Her hands trembled as she pried it open, revealing a narrow tunnel that disappeared into darkness. "Are you insane?" Kale hissed, his voice barely a whisper. "I am the king of—" "You're a dead king if you don't move." Maya cut him off, grabbing his wrist. His skin was surprisingly warm, not cold like she'd expected. "They're coming back. I can hear them." She could. Footsteps echoed from multiple corridors now. The conspirators were returning, probably to plant evidence or set their trap. Kale looked back toward the throne room, his face torn between royal dignity and survival instinct. "Trust me," Maya whispered, and something in her voice made him nod. They squeezed through the maintenance hatch just as voices filled the command hall behind them. Maya pulled the panel closed and led Kale into a world he'd never known existed beneath his own palace. The tunnels were cramped, barely tall enough for Maya to stand upright, and Kale had to duck constantly. Emergency lighting cast eerie red shadows on walls lined with pipes, cables, and ventilation shafts. The air smelled of recycled oxygen and human sweat. "What is this place?" Kale asked, his royal composure cracking as they crawled through a particularly narrow section. "The Rio Palace," Maya replied grimly. "Where your human slaves move supplies and hide from your security patrols. We built this network in the first year after conquest. Your people never bothered to map the maintenance areas. We're invisible, remember?" They moved in silence for several minutes, Maya navigating by memory through twists and turns that would confuse most people. Behind them, muffled voices and the whine of scanning equipment suggested the conspirators were searching the command hall. Finally, Maya led them into a wider chamber where several tunnels intersected. Emergency rations were stacked against one wall, along with medical supplies and communication equipment, all smuggled from various parts of the palace by human workers. Kale stared in amazement. "How many humans know about this?" "Enough," Maya said simply. She wasn't about to reveal the extent of their underground network to an alien, even one whose life she just saved. "Sit down. We need to talk. I don't take orders from." "From what? A human?" Maya's 3 years of suppressed rage suddenly blazed to the surface. "Your high advisor just planned your murder and the extinction of my entire species, and you're worried about protocol?" Kale's mouth snapped shut. He sank onto a supply crate, looking suddenly very young and very lost. "Tell me exactly what you heard," he said quietly. Maya took a shaky breath and repeated the conversation word for word. With each detail, the planned assassination, the fake terrorist attack, the systematic extermination, Kale's expression grew darker. "The Los raised me," he whispered when she finished. "After my father died, he was the only one I trusted completely. He taught me everything about ruling, about maintaining order, about keeping humans as slaves?" Maya asked pointedly. Kale flinched. "I inherited a system I didn't create. I've been trying to reform things gradually, but the Council resists change. They say stability requires—" "Stability?" Maya's voice cracked. "My 6-year-old daughter is in a work camp because your stable system decided children over 5 could operate machinery. My brother is scheduled for execution because someone needed a scapegoat for an attack he didn't commit. How is any of that stable?" "Your brother?" Kale leaned forward. "What's his name?" "Elias Carter. Engineer, falsely accused of sabotaging Power Grid 7. She studied Kale's face. "Why? Does that mean something to you?" "I remember that case. Delos presented it as clear evidence of human terrorism. He said the evidence was overwhelming." Kale's voice trailed off as understanding dawned. "But if he's planning to frame humans for my death, then maybe he framed Elias to start building his narrative about human rebellions," Maya finished. "Make it easier to justify genocide when the time came." The truth hung between them like a weapon. Kale buried his face in his hands, his carefully maintained royal composure finally cracking completely. "I trusted him with everything," he said, his voice muffled. "Every decision, every policy change. If you're right, then I've been a puppet my entire reign. Maya felt an unexpected stab of sympathy. She'd assumed all Zarathi were monsters, but Kale looked like what he was, a young man who'd inherited an impossible situation and been manipulated by people he trusted. What matters now is stopping them, she said. Tomorrow night they kill you and blame it on humans. Then they hunt down every man, woman, and child from Earth. Including my daughter. Kale looked up sharply. You have a child? Had, Maya corrected, her voice hollow. Emma. She'd be 9 now, if she's still alive. I haven't seen her since the conquest. The Zarathi said families would be reunited after processing, but she didn't finish. They both knew the promises had been lies. I can help you find her, Kale said suddenly. After we stop this coup, I can access the records, locate your family. Maya stared at him. Why would you help me? I'm nobody. Just another human slave. Because you saved my life when you could have let me die, Kale replied. Because you're right, this system is wrong, and I've been too blind to see it. And because, he paused, seeming to wrestle with something. Because my father conquered Earth, but I don't have to keep it enslaved. A distant rumble shook the tunnel, followed by the sound of marching feet above them. Maya tensed, listening. Security sweep, she whispered. They're looking for us. For me, you mean, Kale corrected. They probably think I saw something I shouldn't have. What do we do? Kale stood up, his royal bearing returning. We stop them. But first I need to know, how many humans are in this resistance network of yours? Maya hesitated. Every instinct screamed not to trust him, but what choice did she have? Enough to make a difference. If we had a reason to hope, then give them one, Kale said firmly. Tomorrow night, we're going to save 2 civilizations. But I'll need your people's help to do it. The footsteps above grew louder, and Maya could hear scanning equipment getting closer to their section of tunnel. She grabbed Kale's arm. This way. There's another exit that leads to the lower city. We can plan there. As they disappeared deeper into the tunnel network, Maya wondered if she was making the biggest mistake of her life, or taking the first step toward freedom she'd dared to imagine in 3 long years. Dawn broke over Varelia like a wound across the sky, painting the alien spires in shades of amber and crimson. Maya watched from a hidden observation deck in the lower districts as Kale's transport glided silently back toward the palace, his royal guards none the wiser that their king had spent the night crawling through maintenance tunnels with a human janitor. They'd agreed on a plan, dangerous and desperate, but their only chance. Kale would return to court and act normal while gathering intelligence on the conspirators. Maya would use the human underground network to investigate Thalas's activities. If they could find concrete evidence of the coup before tonight's assassination attempt, they might have a chance of stopping it. But first, Maya had a promise to keep. The lower districts were a maze of converted shipping containers and prefabricated housing units where humans lived under constant surveillance. Alien security drones buzzed overhead like mechanical wasps, their sensors scanning for any sign of unrest, which could mean anything from gathering in groups of more than 3 to speaking too loudly about the past. Maya pulled her maintenance worker hood up and kept her head down as she navigated the crowded walkways. The smell hit her before she saw the building, unwashed bodies, recycled air, and the bitter tang of fear. Residential Block C7, where families were crammed 4 to a unit in spaces designed for storage, not human habitation. She found Lila in their tiny shared space, sorting through their weekly ration of nutrient paste and synthetic protein bars. Her younger sister had aged 5 years in the past 3, her once bright brown eyes now hollow and watchful. At 19, Lila looked like she'd forgotten how to smile. Maya? Lila looked up in surprise. You're not supposed to be here during daylight hours. If the supervisors catch you. I know. Maya sat beside her sister on the thin mattress that served as their only furniture. But I have news about Elias. Lila went very still. They'd learned not to hope too much. Hope was a luxury they couldn't afford. But Maya saw the desperate question in her sister's eyes. He's alive. Maya said quickly. And he's innocent. I have proof. She explained about the conspiracy, carefully leaving out her encounter with Kale. Lila listened in stunned silence as Maya described Thalas's admission that Elias had been framed. But Maya, even if you're right, what can we do? Lila whispered. They'll never listen to us. We're just humans. Maybe. But I'm not giving up. Maya pulled her sister close. I promise you, Lila. I'm going to bring him home. Both of them. Both? Maya's throat tightened. Emma too. I'm going to find Emma. Meanwhile, in the crystal halls of the royal palace, King Kale fought to maintain his composure as the royal council convened for their morning session. He sat on the throne of stars, a massive chair carved from a single piece of crystallized starlight that had been in his family for 12 generations, and tried to look like a king who hadn't spent the night questioning everything he'd ever believed. The council chamber was designed to intimidate. Holographic displays showed the vast extent of the Zarathi Empire, while portraits of conquering ancestors lined the walls. Kale had grown up thinking this represented strength and order. Now it looked like a monument to oppression. High Advisor Delos entered with his usual confident stride, his forearms gesturing as he spoke to General Vex. Looking at his mentor now, Kale wondered how he never noticed the coldness in those black diamond eyes, the way Thalas's mouth curved in satisfaction whenever discussing difficult decisions about conquered populations. Your Majesty, Delos said, bowing with perfect respect. I trust you slept well? Adequately, Kale replied, proud that his voice remained steady. What's on today's agenda? Several pressing matters. Delos activated a holographic display showing security reports from across the human districts. We've detected unusual movement in the human residential areas. Our sensors indicate possible coordination between different housing blocks. General Vex stepped forward. We believe they may be planning some form of protest or demonstration. Nothing we can handle, of course, but it suggests we need to tighten security protocols. Kale's blood chilled. Were they already moving against the human population? What kind of unusual movement? Increased communication between family units, sharing of resources, gathering in slightly larger groups. Delos explained. Classic signs of unrest brewing among conquered populations. I've seen it on 7 different worlds. They're scared and trying to take care of each other. Kale said before he could stop himself. That's not the same as planning a rebellion. The room fell silent. Several council members exchanged glances, and Kale realized he'd revealed too much sympathy for the humans. Delos studied him carefully. Your Majesty, perhaps you're still tired from your late-night review of territorial agreements? Your father always said that exhaustion could make a ruler overly compassionate towards security threats. The comment was perfectly crafted, on the surface respectful, but with an underlying challenge that everyone in the room could hear. Kale felt the weight of generations of royal authority pressing down on him, demanding he maintain the status quo. You're right, of course, he said, hating himself for the words. What do you recommend? Stricter controls, Delos replied smoothly. Reduced rations for any family unit that exceeds approved gathering sizes. Enhanced surveillance in the residential blocks. Perhaps some strategic arrests to remind them of their place. Strategic arrests. Kale repeated the phrase like it tasted bitter. You mean taking people from their families without cause? With cause, Your Majesty. Prevention is always preferable to reaction when dealing with potential insurgents. Kale looked around the council chamber at the faces of advisors who'd served his father, who'd helped build this empire on the bones of conquered worlds. How many times had they had this exact conversation about other species? How many families had been torn apart by strategic arrests and prevention protocols? I need time to consider this, he said finally. Table the motion for now. Thalas's expression flickered, just for a moment, with something that might have been irritation. Of course, Your Majesty. Though I should mention that delays in security matters can often lead to unfortunate consequences. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Kale nodded curtly and dismissed the council, watching as his advisors filed out in small groups, Their whispered conversations too quiet to overhear but loaded with meaning. As the chamber emptied, Kale remained on his throne, staring at the holographic displays of his vast empire. Somewhere in those countless star systems were billions of beings living under Zarathi rule. How many were like the humans, enslaved, separated from their families, living in fear of strategic arrests? And how many of his own advisors were already planning to replace him with someone who wouldn't ask uncomfortable questions? The crystal walls of the throne room suddenly felt less like a palace and more like a very beautiful prison. Tonight, Delos would make his move. But first, Kale had to figure out who among his council could be trusted, and whether a king who'd inherited an empire built on oppression could find the strength to tear it down from within. In the lower districts, Maya was asking herself similar questions as she prepared to infiltrate places no human was supposed to go. The difference was that she had no choice. Her family's survival depended on her success. The revolution had begun, whether they were ready or not. The central archives occupied an entire floor of the palace's eastern wing, protected by quantum locks, motion sensors, and patrol drones that could vaporize an intruder before they even realized they'd been detected. It was the last place any human should attempt to enter. Which was exactly why Maya was crouched in a ventilation shaft above it at 3 a.m. Getting here had required help from the underground network. Tommy Rodriguez, a former Denver police officer who now maintained the palace's air filtration systems, had provided the access codes to the ventilation controls. Sarah Kim, a systems analyst turned kitchen worker, had mapped the drone patrol patterns during her late-night food deliveries. And David Chin, once a locksmith and now a janitor like Maya, had taught her how to bypass the quantum security using a technique he'd learned from watching the Zarathi technicians. The resistance was small, but they were smart. 3 years of slavery had taught them to pay attention to details their captors ignored. Maya dropped silently from the shaft onto the archive floor, her heart hammering as proximity sensors swept past her position. She'd rubbed herself with cleaning solution that masked human scent, and wore a stolen maintenance uniform that would read as authorized on casual scans, but none of that would help if she triggered the motion detectors. The archive stretched before her like a digital cathedral. Crystalline data cores rose from floor to ceiling, each one containing the compressed records of entire star systems. The soft blue glow they emitted was beautiful and terrifying. Every conquered world, every enslaved population, every strategic relocation, documented with clinical precision. Maya had exactly 17 minutes before the next security sweep. Kale had provided her with Thalas's access codes, a dangerous gamble that revealed how much he'd grown to trust her. If the Los discovered his codes had been compromised, he'd know Kale was working against him. She found the terminal she needed and plugged in David's homemade interface device. Her fingers flew across the holographic keyboard as she navigated through layers of classified information. Personnel files, military deployment records, resource allocation reports, the digital skeleton of an empire built on oppression. There. Thalas's personal files, encrypted behind multiple security layers. Maya's device chewed through the encryption slowly, each second feeling like an eternity. Around her, the archive hummed with the weight of countless secrets. The files unlocked with a soft chime that made Maya's blood freeze. But no alarms sounded, and the security sweep was still 12 minutes away. What she found made her stomach turn. The Los hadn't just been planning a coup, he'd been systematically building his own private army for over 2 years. Resource allocation records showed massive shipments of weapons and supplies being diverted to Research Station Omega, in the wastelands beyond the capital. Personnel files revealed that dozens of military officers who'd supposedly been transferred to other assignments had actually been secretly assigned to Thalas's command. But the worst discovery was in his communication logs. Messages between the Los and his conspirators, dating back months, discussing not just Kale's assassination but the complete restructuring of the empire under military rule. They weren't just planning to eliminate humans, they intended to turn the Zarathi Empire into a conquering machine that would sweep across the galaxy, enslaving or exterminating every species they encountered. Maya's hands shook as she copied the files. This was bigger than she'd imagined. They weren't just trying to save Earth, they were trying to prevent a galactic holocaust. She was about to disconnect when she saw another folder. Human Pacification Protocols, Earth Sector 7. Her breath caught. This might contain information about the prisoner camps, maybe even records of where Emma and the other children had been taken. 8 minutes until the security sweep. Maya opened the folder and immediately found what she was looking for, Elias's case file. Her brother's photo stared back at her from the screen, thinner than she remembered, but alive. The charges against him were detailed with bureaucratic precision, but as she read deeper, the truth became clear. The sabotage of Power Grid 7 had been an inside job. The real perpetrator was a Zarathi technician named Vexcaler who'd been secretly working for the LOS, creating terrorist incidents to justify harsher measures against humans. Elias had simply been in the wrong place when they needed a scapegoat. The evidence against him, energy weapon residue on his tools, suspicious communication logs, had all been planted. But that wasn't the worst part. The file contained a secondary notation that made Maya's vision blur with rage. Subject scheduled for public execution Day 3, Month 7, to coincide with Phase 1 of Human Pacification Protocol. Tomorrow. They were going to execute her brother tomorrow, the same day they planned to assassinate Kale and begin the genocide. Maya quickly searched for Emma's records, her heart racing as the minutes ticked away. There, Emma Carter, age 9, currently assigned to Agricultural Processing Station 12. The file noted that she was showing exceptional adaptation to Zarathi educational protocols, and was being considered for advanced integration training. Maya didn't know what that meant, but Emma was alive. Her little girl was alive. 5 minutes until security sweep. Maya copied everything she could and prepared to leave, but as she was disconnecting her device, proximity alarms began blaring throughout the archive. Red lights bathed the crystalline cores as an automated voice announced, "Unauthorized access detected. Security protocol active. Lockdown initiated." Maya's blood turned to ice. She'd been discovered. Emergency barriers slammed down over the exits as patrol drones swarmed toward her position. Maya grabbed her device and ran, dodging between data cores as energy blasts seared the air around her. The drones were fast, but they were designed to patrol open spaces, not navigate tight corners. She reached the ventilation shaft she'd entered through, but the emergency lockdown had sealed it. Maya looked around desperately as the drones closed in, their scanners painting target locks across her body. There, a waste disposal chute in the far corner, barely visible behind a bank of data cores. Maya sprinted toward it as energy blasts exploded around her, diving through the chute opening just as a drone's blast vaporized the floor where she'd been standing. She tumbled through darkness, ricocheting off pipes and conduits before crashing into a collection tank filled with organic waste from the palace kitchens. The smell was overwhelming, but she was alive. Maya lay in the darkness, listening to the muffled sounds of security teams searching the archives above. She had the evidence she needed to prove Thalas's treachery, but getting it to Kale before tonight's assassination attempt would require a miracle. As she crawled through the waste processing tunnels toward safety, Maya clutched the data device against her chest. Somewhere in its memory were the files that could save 2 civilizations, if she could survive long enough to use them. The hunt for the human intruder had begun, and every second counted. By tomorrow, either the galaxy would be free, or it would burn under the boot of a military empire that would make the current oppression look merciful by comparison. Maya Carter, invisible janitor turned reluctant spy, had become the most wanted person in the Zarathi Empire. And she was just getting started. Maya emerged from the waste processing tunnels reeking of kitchen scraps and chemical disinfectant, but alive. Dawn was breaking over Virelia again, and she had less than 18 hours before the Los would make his move. The data device felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds in her pocket, evidence that could save the galaxy, if she could get it to the right person. Getting to Kale wouldn't be easy. Security alerts were flashing across every display screen in the palace, and patrol teams were conducting systematic sweeps of every level. Maya used her knowledge of the maintenance tunnels to avoid the main corridors, but even the hidden passages felt dangerous now. She found Kale in the Royal Observatory, a crystalline dome at the palace's highest point where he often went to think. He was staring out at the city below, his violet eyes reflecting the morning light streaming through the transparent walls. "They're hunting someone in the palace," he said without turning around. "The Los claims it was a human spy who broke into the archives. He's using it to justify emergency security measures." "It was me," Maya said simply. Kale spun around, his face a mixture of relief and horror. "Maya, what were you thinking? If they'd caught you, they would have killed me, yes." Maya pulled out the data device. "But they didn't. And I found proof." She activated the device, projecting holographic displays of Thalas's secret files. Kale's expression grew darker with each revelation: the diverted resources, the secret army, the communications planning not just his assassination but the transformation of the Empire into a military dictatorship. "My God!" Kale whispered as he read the execution orders for human leaders across 12 colonies. "He's not just planning genocide. He's planning to militarize the entire Empire. There's more." Maya showed him Elias's case file. "My brother was framed. The real saboteur was one of Thalas's agents, creating incidents to justify harsher treatment of humans." Kale studied the evidence, his hands trembling slightly. "This proves everything, but Maya, I can't just arrest the Los based on stolen files. Half the Royal Council would see it as a power grab. Without proper procedure." "Proper procedure?" Maya's voice rose dangerously. "Your advisor's planning to murder you tonight and exterminate my species, and you're worried about proper procedure? You don't understand the politics involved. No, you don't understand." Maya's 3 years of suppressed rage exploded. "While you've been playing politics, my daughter has been enslaved for 3 years. My brother is scheduled for execution tomorrow. Millions of humans are going to die tonight, and you're talking about procedures?" Kale stood up, his own anger flaring. "I'm trying to save the Empire. If I move too fast, it could trigger a civil war that would kill billions." "The Empire?" Maya stared at him in disbelief. "You're still thinking about saving the Empire that enslaved us? It's not that simple. The Los raised me, taught me everything I know about ruling. If I'm wrong about him..." "If you're wrong?" Maya's voice turned deadly quiet. "You think I risked my life to steal evidence just to manipulate you? You think I'm lying about what I heard? That's not what I meant." "Yes, it is." Maya backed toward the exit. "You're just like the rest of them. When it comes down to it, you trust other Zarathi more than you trust a human." "Maya, wait." But before either of them could say another word, a thunderous explosion rocked the palace. The crystalline walls of the observatory cracked, and alarms began screaming throughout the complex. Through the transparent dome, they could see smoke rising from the east wing. "That's the communications center," Kale said, his face pale. "They've started early." Maya rushed to the observation platform and looked down at the palace courtyard. Figures in dark armor were moving through the complex, not regular palace guards, but soldiers she didn't recognize. "Thalas's secret army. The coup has begun," she whispered. Kale activated his personal communicator, but only static answered. "They've jammed all frequencies. I can't reach my loyal guards." Another explosion shook the palace, this one closer. Maya grabbed Kale's arm. "We have to get out of here. If they find you..." "No," Kale pulled away, his royal authority reasserting itself. "I won't run from my own palace. This is my empire, and I'll fight for it." "Your empire?" Maya laughed bitterly. 5 minutes ago you couldn't even decide whether to trust me over the man planning to kill you. How are you going to fight an army?" The words hit Kale like a physical blow. He stared at her, his violet eyes filled with pain and confusion. I don't know." The admission broke something in both of them. Here was the most powerful being in the known universe, admitting he was lost. And here was Maya, a human slave who'd risked everything to save him, watching him crumble under the weight of impossible choices. "Your Majesty?" a voice called from the observatory entrance. They turned to see Captain Zara, one of Kale's personal guards, her armor scorched and her weapon drawn. "We need to evacuate you immediately. Rebel forces have taken the main levels." Kale looked from the captain to Maya, then back to the burning city below. "How many loyal troops do we have?" "Maybe 50, sir." "They have hundreds, and more arriving every hour." "Then it's over," Kale said quietly. "No," Maya said suddenly, stepping forward. "It's not over. But you have to choose, Kale. Right now. Do you trust me or don't you?" Kale met her eyes, and for a moment the artificial barriers between human and alien, slave and ruler, fell away. There were just two people facing an impossible situation, with the fate of billions hanging in the balance. "I trust you," he said finally. "Then we don't fight them head on. We're smarter than they are." Maya activated the data device again. "You said half the Royal Council would see arresting the Los as a power grab? Fine. Let's give them something they can't ignore." "What do you mean?" Maya smiled grimly, her mind racing with desperate possibilities. "We broadcast these files to every colony in the Empire. Let the Los explain to his own people why he's been planning to turn them into cannon fodder for his galactic war machine." Another explosion, closer this time. Through the cracked dome, they could see armed figures moving up the palace towers toward their position. "They're coming," Captain Zara reported. "We have maybe 5 minutes." Kale looked at Maya one more time. "If we do this, there's no going back. We'll be fugitives in my own empire." "You're already a fugitive," Maya replied. "The question is whether you're going to die as one, or fight back." Kale nodded grimly and turned to his guard. "Captain, do you know how to reach the backup communications array?" "Yes, sir, but it's heavily defended." "Then that's where we're going." Kale looked out at his burning capital one last time. "It's time to remind the Empire who their real enemies are." The revolution had begun in earnest, and Maya Carter was no longer fighting just for her family's survival. She was fighting for the soul of the galaxy itself. The backup communications array was located 3 miles away in the industrial undercity, buried beneath layers of machinery and processing plants that kept Virilia running. Getting there alive would require a miracle. Captain Zara led them through a hidden exit that opened into the palace's waste management facility. The smell was overwhelming, but it masked their scent from the tracking drones now swarming the upper levels. Maya had never been more grateful for her experience in the maintenance tunnels. "Stay close and stay quiet," Zara whispered as they emerged into the industrial district. "Thalos's forces are everywhere, and they have kill orders for both of you." The undercity was a maze of steam pipes, conveyor belts, and massive processing units that converted raw materials into everything the Empire needed. Neon signs and alien script cast eerie shadows between towering smokestacks, while the constant thrum of machinery provided cover for their footsteps. Maya had cleaned these facilities for months and knew the layout better than most. She took point, leading them through a labyrinth of catwalks and service corridors that connected the different processing plants. Above them, she could hear the whine of patrol drones and the heavy footsteps of armored soldiers. They'd made it halfway to their destination when the first hunters found them. "Contact! 3 targets moving through Sector 7. The voice echoed from speakers mounted on a patrol drone that had spotted them crossing between buildings. Energy blasts seared the air around them as more drones converged on their position. Kale stumbled, a blast grazing his shoulder and burning through his royal robes. Maya grabbed his arm, pulling him toward a transport tunnel that ran beneath the main thoroughfare. "This way!" she shouted over the noise of pursuing aircraft. They tumbled into the tunnel just as a missile struck the walkway they'd been standing on, sending chunks of metal and concrete raining down. The transport tunnel was designed for cargo containers, but Maya remembered maintenance crews using it as a shortcut between facilities. Captain Zara sealed the entrance behind them with her weapons overload setting, buying them precious seconds. But they could already hear cutting tools working on the sealed door. "They'll be through in minutes," Zara reported, her breathing heavy. The tunnel stretched ahead of them like a throat, lit by emergency strips that cast everything in hellish red light. Maya led them deeper into the darkness, following maintenance markers she'd memorized during her cleaning duties. They were moving through a junction when Kale suddenly collapsed, his injured shoulder bleeding heavily. The energy blast had done more damage than they'd realized. "I can't," he gasped, leaning against the tunnel wall. "Go without me. You have to get that evidence broadcast. Nobody gets left behind," Maya said firmly. She looked around desperately and spotted a maintenance alcove marked with symbols she recognized. "In here." The alcove was barely large enough for the three of them, designed to house emergency equipment for tunnel repairs. Maya activated the camouflage field, a trick Davidson had taught her after watching Zarathi technicians hide equipment from routine inspections. They pressed themselves against the back wall as the sound of boots echoed through the tunnel. Maya found herself inches away from Kale, close enough to see the pain and exhaustion in his violet eyes. His breathing was shallow, and blood from his shoulder wound was seeping through his makeshift bandage. "Don't talk," Maya whispered, the words that had started their unlikely partnership now taking on desperate urgency. The soldiers were getting closer. Maya could hear their equipment scanning the tunnel, their voices growing louder as they approached the alcove. Her heart hammered so loudly she was sure they'd hear it. "Thermal scans show 3 signatures passed through here," one soldier reported. "But the trail goes cold at this junction. Check every alcove, every side passage," another voice commanded. Maya recognized it, General Vex, Thalas's military enforcer. "They can't have vanished." Footsteps moved past their hiding spot, then returned. Maya held her breath as a scanning device swept over their position, the beam passing inches from her face. The camouflage field held, but barely. "Sir, we're getting interference from the industrial equipment," a technician reported. "All this machinery is scrambling our sensors." "Then search manually," Beck snarled. "Tear this place apart if you have to." Maya felt Kale's hand find hers in the darkness. His skin was cold, and she could feel him trembling from blood loss. If they were discovered now, he wouldn't have the strength to run. The soldiers spent another agonizing 10 minutes searching the junction before finally moving on. Maya waited until their voices faded completely before allowing herself to breathe normally. "They're gone," she whispered. Kale tried to stand but stumbled. The energy blast had burned through muscle and possibly bone. He needed medical attention they couldn't provide. "I'm slowing you down," he said, his voice weak but determined. "Take the data device and go. Captain Zara can help you reach the communications array." "No," Maya helped him to his feet, supporting his weight. "We started this together, we finish it together. Maya, be practical." "I'm injured, I'm a liability." "You're the king," Maya interrupted. "When we broadcast those files, they need to hear them from you. Your voice carries authority mine never could." They resumed moving through the tunnel system, but their pace was agonizingly slow. Kale leaned heavily on Maya, his blood leaving a trail that their pursuers might eventually follow. Behind them, they could hear the distant sounds of the search continuing. "There!" Captain Zara pointed ahead to where the tunnel emerged into a vast chamber filled with humming machinery. "The communications array is in the central tower." But as they approached the exit, Maya's heart sank. The chamber was crawling with Thalas's soldiers, their positions covering every approach to the tower. Searchlights swept the area in overlapping patterns, and patrol drones circled the communications equipment like mechanical vultures. "It's a trap," Zara breathed. "They knew we'd come here." Maya studied the scene, her mind racing. Getting to that tower seemed impossible, but somewhere in those machines was their only hope of exposing Thalas's conspiracy to the galaxy. "There has to be another way," she muttered, remembering every maintenance protocol she'd ever learned. "These industrial facilities, they're all connected." Kale gripped her arm weakly. "Maya, whatever you're thinking, it's too dangerous. Everything we've done has been too dangerous," she replied, studying the layout of pipes and conveyor systems that connected the chamber to the rest of the facility. "But being invisible has some advantages." As the sounds of their pursuers grew closer behind them, Maya began planning the most desperate infiltration of her life. The communications array waited like a fortress, but she'd learned that sometimes the best way to storm a fortress was to crawl through its foundations. The hunt was far from over, and time was running out. Maya studied the fortress-like communications chamber for several minutes before she found what she was looking for, a maintenance conduit that fed directly into the central tower's power systems. It was barely wide enough for a human to crawl through, which meant Thalos' soldiers would never expect anyone to use it. "I'm going alone," she told Kale and Captain Zara. "I can reach the broadcast controls through that conduit, but someone needs to stay here and create a distraction when I give the signal." "Absolutely not," Kale protested, though his injured shoulder made his objection seem weaker. "We're not splitting up. We don't have a choice." Maya pulled out the data device. "If I don't make it, you have to find another way to get this information out." She was about to enter the conduit when Kale grabbed her arm with his good hand. "Maya, when this is over, I want you to know that meeting you changed everything for me. Whatever happens, you've already won." There wasn't time for a proper goodbye. Maya squeezed his hand once and disappeared into the narrow passage. The conduit was a nightmare of sharp edges and electrical hazards, but Maya had spent 3 years crawling through places designed for maintenance, not comfort. She followed the power lines toward the tower's core, using her stolen access codes to bypass security checkpoints along the way. When she finally emerged into the secret communications chamber beneath the main array, Maya couldn't believe her luck. The room was empty except for banks of quantum transmitters capable of reaching every corner of the Empire. She quickly began setting up the broadcast equipment, her fingers flying over controls she'd watched Zarathi technicians operate hundreds of times. She was just activating the signal booster when she heard footsteps in the corridor outside. Maya's blood froze. Had she been discovered? But the voice that echoed through the chamber wasn't calling for her capture. It was Kale, and he sounded perfectly calm. "Delos, I know you're monitoring this facility. I'm here to surrender." Maya stared at the communication panel in shock. What was he doing? They'd agreed he would create a distraction, not give himself up. The chamber door opened, and Delos entered with General Vex and a squad of armed guards. Behind them, more soldiers dragged in a wounded but defiant Kale. "Your Majesty," Delos said with mock concern. "I'm so relieved you're safe. When we heard about the terrorist attack on the palace, we feared the worst." "Terrorist attack?" Kale's voice carried clearly through the chamber's acoustics. "Is that what you're calling your coup attempt?" Thalos' expression didn't change, but Maya caught the slight tension in his posture. "I'm afraid I don't understand, Your Majesty. Perhaps your injury has affected your judgment." "My judgment is perfectly clear," Kale replied. "I know about your secret army, Delos. I know about your plans to assassinate me and blame it on human terrorists. And I know you've been planning this for years." Maya realized what Kale was doing. He was getting Delos to confess while she recorded everything. She quickly activated the broadcasting equipment, making sure every word was being transmitted to loyalist forces and outer colonies throughout the Empire. "Your Majesty, these are serious accusations," General Vex interjected. "Do you have proof of these claims?" "I have all the proof I need," Kale said confidently, "including evidence that you framed innocent humans for terrorist attacks to justify your security measures." Thalos' composure finally cracked. "Enough of this charade." His forearms gestured dismissively. "Yes, I planned your removal, Kale. Your father would be ashamed of what you've become, a weak ruler who shows mercy to conquered species instead of maintaining proper order." Maya's heart raced. He was confessing everything, and it was all being broadcast live. The humans were supposed to be eliminated years ago. Delos continued, his voice growing more passionate. "But you kept talking about gradual integration and sustainable governance. Pathetic. Your father conquered 12 worlds through strength and fear, not by coddling the defeated. So you decided to remove me and finish the job yourself," Kale said. "I decided to save the Empire from your weakness." Delos snarled. "Once you're gone, we'll crush the human resistance, eliminate every last one of them, and use their extermination as an example to other conquered species. Then we'll resume proper expansion, not the defensive stagnation you've imposed, but true conquest. 1,000 worlds will bow before Zarathi might." General Vex stepped forward, drawing his weapon. This conversation has gone on long enough. It's time to end this. Yes, Belos agreed. Kill him quickly. We'll say he died heroically trying to stop the human terrorist who destroyed the communications array. That was Maya's cue. She activated the emergency lighting system, plunging the chamber into strobing red chaos while simultaneously broadcasting Kale's pre-recorded message on all channels. Citizens of the Zarathi Empire, this is your king. High Advisor Delos has committed treason against the crown and is attempting a military coup. The evidence you are about to see proves that he has systematically framed innocent humans for terrorist attacks while building a secret army to overthrow the legitimate government. The chamber erupted in confusion as Delos realized his confession had been broadcast across the empire. Find that transmitter! He roared. Cut the signal! But it was too late. Through the communication arrays, Maya could hear responses flooding in from loyalist commanders across the galaxy, expressing shock and outrage at Thalas's revelations. Sir, we're receiving surrender requests from half our forces, one of Vex's lieutenants reported in panic. The outer colonies are demanding explanations. Maya's signal booster had done its job perfectly. Thalas's own words were echoing across 1,000 worlds, destroying his credibility and turning his own supporters against him. You! Delos spun toward where Maya was hidden, his forearms gesturing wildly. This was all orchestrated by that human. Find her! Chaos erupted as loyalist forces, alerted by the broadcast, stormed into the chamber. Captain Zara led the charge, her weapon cutting down guards who'd been pointing guns at Kale moments before. In the confusion, Maya fought her way to Kale's side. Together, they watched as the man who'd planned genocide was surrounded by his own betrayed soldiers. It's over, Maya whispered, hardly daring to believe it. But Delos, cornered and desperate, wasn't finished yet. With a snarl of rage, he lunged toward Kale with a hidden energy blade, determined to complete his assassination even if it meant his own death. Maya didn't think, she just moved, throwing herself between them as the blade descended. The energy blade seared across Maya's shoulder, but Kale's reflexes, honed by years of royal combat training, kicked in just in time. He caught Thalas's wrist, deflecting the killing blow while Captain Zara's weapon found its mark. The High Advisor collapsed, his plans for galactic conquest dying with him. Maya pressed her hand to her bleeding shoulder, the pain sharp but not life-threatening. Around them, the last of Thalas's loyalist guards surrendered as it became clear the coup had failed. The communications chamber filled with the voices of colony commanders across the empire, all pledging their loyalty to the rightful king. It's really over, Kale said, his voice filled with wonder and exhaustion. But Maya was already thinking ahead. Not yet. You need to address the empire. Right now, while everyone's listening. Kale nodded and moved to the main communications array. His image would be broadcast to every world in Zarathi space, the first time many citizens would see their young king not as a distant figurehead, but as a person who'd fought for their freedom. Citizens of the Zarathi Empire, Kale began, his voice steady despite his injuries. Today, we've exposed a conspiracy that would have plunged our galaxy into endless war. High Advisor Delos and his accomplices planned not just my assassination, but the systematic extermination of entire species, beginning with humanity. Maya watched the responses flooding in from across the empire, shock, outrage, and relief that the truth had been revealed. But this broadcast isn't just about exposing treason. Kale continued. It's about acknowledging a fundamental truth. The Zarathi Empire has been built on the oppression of conquered peoples, and that ends today. He paused, looking directly at Maya before continuing. I hereby order the immediate release of all human prisoners held on false charges, beginning with Elias Carter, who was framed by Thalas's agents for a crime he didn't commit. Maya's knees nearly buckled with relief. Elias would be free. After 3 years of nightmare, her brother would finally come home. Furthermore, Kale announced, I am issuing a complete amnesty for all humans currently in the labor camps. The era of enslavement is over. Effective immediately, all humans in the Empire are granted full citizenship rights, including freedom of movement, the right to own property, and the right to reunite with their families. The chamber erupted in surprised murmurs from the loyalist soldiers. This went far beyond anything they'd expected. Kale raised his hand for silence. I know this decision will be controversial. Change always is. But an empire built on the suffering of others is not an empire worth preserving. We will rebuild our civilization on principles of justice and cooperation, not conquest and oppression. Your Majesty. One of the commanders spoke through the communication link. What about the economic disruption? Our entire infrastructure depends on slave labor. Kale finished firmly. Then we'll build a better infrastructure. One based on willing participation and fair compensation. It won't be easy, but it's necessary. Maya stepped forward, and Kale gestured for her to join him at the communications array. Citizens of the Empire, I want you to meet Maya Carter. She's a mother, a sister, and a human being who risked everything to save not just my life, but the lives of billions across our galaxy. Today, I'm appointing her as the Empire's first chief human liaison, with full authority to oversee the integration of humanity into our civilization as equals. Maya looked out at the camera, knowing that millions of beings across hundreds of worlds were seeing a human woman standing beside their king as an equal for the first time in the Empire's history. This is just the beginning, she said, her voice carrying the strength of 3 years of survival and the hope of millions who never dared to dream of freedom. For too long, humans have been invisible in this empire. Today, we step into the light. Over the following hours, the true scope of the transformation became clear. Reports flooded in from across the galaxy as labor camps opened their gates, families were reunited, and humans began the long journey from slavery to citizenship. It wasn't perfect. There was resistance from some sectors, confusion and logistical nightmares everywhere, but it was a start. 3 days later, Maya stood on the palace's highest balcony as the first transport ships arrived carrying freed humans from the outer colonies. Among them, she spotted 2 figures that made her heart leap. Elias, thinner than she remembered but alive and free, walked down the transport ramp with his characteristic engineer's careful gait. And beside him, holding his hand with the trust only children possess, was a 9-year-old girl with blonde hair and Maya's blue eyes. Emma, Maya whispered, and then she was running. The reunion was everything she dreamed of for 3 years: tears, laughter, and the overwhelming relief of holding her daughter again. Emma had grown so much, but she still remembered her mother's voice, still called her Mama, in the way that made Maya's heart soar. I knew you'd find me, Emma said with the absolute faith of childhood. I told everyone my mom was the strongest person in the universe. Later, as the sun set over Virilia, Maya found herself back on the palace balcony with Kale. The city below buzzed with activity as humans and aliens worked together to process the massive changes taking place. Your courage saved not just me, but the entire empire, Kale said quietly, echoing words he'd spoken in the heat of battle. Maya looked out at the celebration in the streets below, where humans danced with aliens who'd once been their oppressors. We saved each other. That's what people do when they stop seeing each other as enemies. What happens now? Kale asked. Maya smiled, thinking of Emma's laugh, of Elias's plans to help rebuild infrastructure as a free engineer, of Lila's first real smile in 3 years. Now we do the hard work. Building something better than what came before. Kale nodded, understanding the weight of the task ahead. It won't be easy. Nothing worthwhile ever is, Maya replied. But for the first time in 3 years, I'm not afraid of tomorrow. As dawn broke over Virilia, painting the crystal spires in shades of gold and hope, Maya Carter stood beside the king of the Zarathi Empire as an equal. The invisible janitor had become a voice for the voiceless, a bridge between species, and a symbol of what was possible when people chose courage over fear. Her journey from desperate slave to revolutionary leader was complete, but her real work, building a galaxy where no child would grow up in chains, was just beginning. The empire would never be the same. And that, Maya thought as she watched her daughter play in the palace gardens, was exactly the point.